College is a wild ride for young adults, and their mental health often suffers. This podcast addresses the inner battles many college students struggle with. You're listening to Normalize It Forward, where we have raw, unfiltered conversations about young people's biggest mental health problems, how to handle them, and how to achieve a more resilient mind. Time to get rid of those heavy burdens and focus more on self-love and care. Here is your host, Mark Kligman.
Welcome to Normalize It Forward, everybody. My name is Mark Lehman. I am a family therapist and here to talk tonight about mental health and wellness with a very excited guest, Greg Kligman. Greg, welcome into the program. How are you this evening?
Thank you, Mark. I'm doing really well, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and talk about what I think is a very important topic, among others, of course.
I appreciate it. So, Greg, why don't we jump in? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, why don't I do it in the reverse order people usually might do it? I'm going to start in reverse chronology with the most recent. So,
Perfect.
Recently I became a coach certified with the International Coach Federation. That was an outcropping of work I was doing before, which was at Amazon Web Services. I was there for about 4 years, and I started on the employee engagement team, and I transitioned into leadership development, where I started my coaching trajectory, and I finished it after I left the company. And before Amazon, I worked at a communication skills training company in a sales role, so helping people learn how to be effective communicators on the spot, how to do presentation skills, how to be an effective writer before computers came along and just did everybody's writing for us, which is maybe the case right now with AI and so on. And it was actually my, that work, Amazon was one of my clients, and that's what led to my transition into Amazon. And all along at that time, I was doing, which I really want to focus on today, was the volunteer work that I've been doing for the past 10 years or so through distress centers of Greater Toronto. So now I live in Montreal, which is my hometown. I moved back here about 5 years ago, but I lived in Toronto for about 20 years. And there I began volunteering with distress centers of Greater Toronto, first on the crisis line. So just basically, it's funny, it's called a crisis line, and there's nothing funny about it, but an actual acute crisis, the most serious thing we could ever face on the crisis line would be what we call a suicide in progress, where we have to get very active very quickly and take control. But that is such a rare occurrence, at least it was for me. I got maybe 1 or 2 calls in the 2 years that I did that work. By and large, it's people calling out of isolation, which is crushing. People just wanting to reach out and connect with another human being. And it was through that work that I got into the next stage of my volunteer work within distress centers of Greater Toronto, which is what I've been doing ever since. So I stopped working on the distress line, and I joined what's called the Survivor Support Program, which is run by a gentleman named Alex Schendelman. And as far as I know, not only is it unique in Canada, but I think it's unique in the world, where volunteers specifically work with people who have suffered traumatic loss. So mainly suicide, but there are homicide supports as well, which I've done a little bit of, but I've really focused on supporting people who have lost somebody to suicide. Starting off mostly working with individuals, and since then I've focused mainly on working in groups. The participants have the choice. Do they want to be in what we call a one-on-one or in a group? And many people do both. And a one-on-one it's never one-on-one. So it's always a volunteer team. It's somebody, they pair a volunteer who has lived experience, who they themselves have lost somebody to suicide, and somebody who has not. So I'm the one who has not lost somebody to suicide. And since then, I've become part of their training to train new volunteers. And it's changed my life in numerous ways. In fact, it was that experience and the training I got in listening and empathy and being supportive that actually I brought a lot of that into Amazon, and I created a workshop called The Language of Empathy, which was how to lead with empathy. And I also introduced a grief group. This was just a serendipitous thing. It wasn't part of my job description, but as my manager at Amazon said, Greg, when you're at Amazon, it's not so much what you do, it's what else you do. So they're always welcoming new ideas to bring to the table. And in that case, I launched a group for child and baby loss, which is not something I'd ever expected to be involved with. It's not something I have personal experience with, but there was a need for it. And certainly there are a lot of overlaps in terms of how you support somebody going through that kind of grief, because grief essentially is grief, the way, and we're all going to experience it eventually if we haven't already. But certainly suicide loss has some particularities which are unique to that kind of grief, unfortunately, which is basically, if I had to list three, it would be stigma, shame, and guilt. And this is one of the really unfortunate things about people who are dealing with having lost a loved one to suicide is in the many, many, many people I've worked with, I don't know that I've ever met one who hasn't to some degree blamed themselves in some way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I
having worked
could have,
with
should
Go ahead.
have, what
Yeah.
if, that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. I've worked with some families myself that have been impacted by suicide, and you're right. It is just a different type of loss. You've got quite a bit of experience, and I want to just frame this a bit for families so they have a sense of, this is a topic. Suicide is a topic that nobody likes to talk about. It's a topic that, to be honest, I think most people really avoid talking about. But it's a topic that really is out there. And, just a bit about my background, Greg. I work with students across the country in various college settings and have, virtually for quite some time now. And, it's quite sad, but often I would say, maybe a dozen times a year, I hear a story from a student, and it's always sort of the same context of someone who took their own life on a particular campus. Maybe my student knows them, maybe they don't. But the ripple effect of all of the people that are affected by that loss is tremendous. And you're
Yep.
right there. You're right there in the middle of working with families that have been affected. What is that like? Can you describe that?
What a question. What's it like? It's many things. It's a privilege to do it, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's some of the hardest conversations I've had in my life.
Yeah.
And what I'm offering in those conversations is mainly presence and empathy and holding space for them to express themselves and to talk. But yeah, the stories I've heard and to see what people live with every day. And I have to say that when it is young people, I tell people grief is not a competition. And sometimes people will be in a group and they'll say, oh, I just lost my brother. I didn't lose my child. And it's like, you didn't just lose your brother, but there is something particularly awful about young people who are drawn to that outcome. And I'm not going to use the word decision because that's a pretty contentious word to use. Is it actually a choice? But they're drawn to that outcome, and it's awful.
A lot of pain, leaving people with a lot of pain, and it's awful. I guess covers it. In terms of its impact. And I guess I want families to understand too, as we're talking about this topic, kind of the why behind it. And I created Normalize It Forward to be able to have these hard conversations and to be able to talk about these difficult topics, mainly so that we can avoid having to be in them, and avoid having to experience them. And, there are young people out there that are listening to this show that are hurting, that are isolating, that are by themselves, and they're at risk. And, the risk is very, very real, Greg, as you know.
Mark, could I just give a quick message because you mentioned there's young
please.
people listening.
I appreciate it. Yeah, please.
Young people, if you're listening, or less young people, anybody listening, if you're having thoughts of taking your own life, please talk to somebody. I assure you, you're not alone. It's awful. You probably feel alone. You probably feel that nobody can understand what you're going through. And you might be right. You might be living with a level of pain that nobody can understand. I don't want to say that's not true.
Yeah.
But there are people who care and who will listen to you and who do want to help. So please do talk to somebody.
Yeah. Such an excellent point, Greg. I appreciate you putting that out there. And I would just highlight that over and over again. It's amazing to me when young people do reach out. Not only are there people out there, how many people out there care? There's a lot of people out there that care. There's a lot of people out there that understand. And one thing that always bothers me is when young people struggle by themselves, right? Because they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be by themselves. You're doing tremendous work, Greg. I have to say. I mean, I think it's amazing what you've done over the years. Tell my listeners, how does a person get involved in something like this?
I suspect wherever you happen to be living, I'm speaking directly to the listener now, there are probably organizations and community service organizations and so on who are looking for people. Just look up volunteering, helping, supporting, and see what's out there. That's how I did it. It started with a Google search. In my case, I knew it was something I wanted to do. Going back to when I was a teen, I remember that I called the distress line. I don't remember what I spoke about. I really don't, but I do remember how I felt after the call. And the only words I remember that the woman said to me during our conversation was, "That sounds hard, Greg. That sounds hard." And just hearing those words, that somebody was validating the fact that what I said sounds hard, even though I never met her, she was just a voice. It had such tremendous therapeutic value that I felt somebody gets it. I think people lose hope for many reasons, but one of the worst things is when you feel hopeless, that nobody gets it and there's no help.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. You also said before we started recording today, I just want to bring it back to our conversation. I'm a licensed therapist. I've been doing this for 25 years. You don't need to be a licensed therapist.
Right.
You need to be a human being. You need to be a person who expresses empathy and care and concern. You need to be a good listener. And I think a lot of people fall into that category.
So thanks for bringing that up. So it's true. The Distress Center program runs on peer support. So you don't need to be a therapist. And anywhere in your life, you're going to have an opportunity to be supportive to people who are grieving. And I want you to know that don't be worried about saying the perfect thing, because there is no perfect thing. There is nothing you can say that's going to take the pain away. So take that pressure right off yourself. There are no such words that can do that. But if you show that you care and you're available to listen, even send a text saying, "Thinking about you, no need to respond."
That's big.
Just to take the pressure off, but to let them know, check in, because we hear that a lot, that people feel that a lot of their community just kind of goes away because, like you said before, people are very uncomfortable with the topic of suicide. In fact, I think people are very uncomfortable just with any version of death. It scares a lot of people because it's kind of waiting for us all, and we'd prefer not to talk about it. But suicide takes that to an extra level. Like, what do you possibly say to somebody who's lost a family member to suicide? I don't know what to say to somebody. There is nothing to say, but I understand that people could put that on themselves. I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm only going to make it worse if I say something, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to let them come to me. And the heart is in the right place when one is thinking that, but the impression it could leave is that people just, they're kind of afraid of me now, or they're avoiding me, and that could add to the loneliness that people feel when they're dealing with this. So I would urge people, invite conversation. Don't force it, because especially if it's something that happened recently, people just, not only are they taking their life day by day, sometimes it's minute by minute, but a text showing, "I'm thinking about you, available if you want to talk, no need to respond." That's important, because
I like that.
Don't put that. Yeah. Any extra pressure is just an extra heavy weight at that point. Yeah.
Right, let me ask your opinion about something, because you're around this a lot. The stats on mental health, especially for young people, they're moving in the wrong direction. The suicide rates are up tremendously. I guess I'm wondering, from your point of view, is there one reason? Is there several reasons? Like, what seems to be causing some of that?
Yeah. So, Mark, this is strictly in the domain of my opinion, because I'm
Yeah,
not an expert in
absolutely.
any of this, but
Mhm.
I would say social media presents a perfect life that is not attainable for a lot of people. I would say that bullying is very easy online. People will be mean online in a way that they wouldn't if they were face to face. You can type something. I've seen with my own 16-year-old that what goes on is that there will be these group chats that she gets pulled into, and people will start sending screenshots of group chats to other people. And these are teenagers. Like, teenage is hard in the best of times, but I think social media has made it a lot harder. It's so easy to be nasty to one another. I'd like to think it's makes it easier to be nice to one another too. That probably is, it's not all doom and gloom, but from what I've seen, I think just the social media has made people more isolated, more likely to be aspiring to something that's impossible. And they're aspiring to something that even if they got it, it wouldn't give them the satisfaction and happiness they think, the perfect lives, these influencers and so on. I think there's just so much insincerity now. I think a lot of young people just don't know where they fit. But Mark, I defer to your expertise on this because, like I said, I'm just giving my opinion.
It's a great opinion. It's a great opinion. I guess I would add to what you just said about satisfaction. I just heard it today from a young person in my office. I like asking young people, what would satisfy you? Like, what would make you feel satisfied as a human being in the future? And most of them don't have answers. Most of them, have no idea. And I think it's part of our journey in life to try to figure out what makes us happy. And unfortunately, some young people are searching down the wrong paths. Social media can be really detrimental to some kids, and it's also done kind of in privacy. So, like for us as parents, unless you're really being aware of what your child is doing online all the time, there's probably some that you're not aware of, and some of it can get pretty awful, pretty terrible. Like you said, Greg, I have the opinion as well that social media can be used for positive reasons. One of the things I do with my business is to, spread the gospel, if you will, of this type of stuff. So I think it can be used for, it's got its intentions. But I will say this, and I don't know if you see this you mentioned your 16-year-old, it's an intense world that we live in. Way more intense, in my opinion, than when we were kids, and I often find myself when I'm working with young people thinking, what would it be like for me if I was a 16-year-old now, 17-year-old now? The qualifications in the States to get into certain colleges have gone way up. So the intensity of life, I just remember when I was a kid, I loved baseball. So I'd play, Little League, right? And you'd play your game, you'd have your soda, you'd go home, and that would be it. Now kids are playing like 3 games a day. They're in 4 different leagues. They're this. It just doesn't seem fun to me. It seems intense.
Yeah, if they're being over-programmed and so on.
Right.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
And also, when I went to university, it was never expected that getting a job was easy. But I can't imagine what it's like now when you go into university and you're kind of hearing through your other ear, oh, by the way, all those jobs you think you're going to be getting, AI is going to be doing that.
Right.
So what are you at,
Right.
I can't imagine the stress, the prices of everything, real estate has gone up. So what is it like to be a teenager now? You're going to, I'm going to go to university. I earned my way in, but am I actually going to be able to learn skills that I could earn a living with in the world when all I hear is that AI is going to be taking over so many jobs? Like, what is that like to feel that the prices of everything is going up? The jobs are going away, but somehow I've got to figure this out. I think I'm sure it was never easy to be a teenager, but I can't help but think that nowadays it's just got to be incrementally or exponentially harder than it ever has been before.
I would agree. I see it every day with my students. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. Let me shift away from that for a minute, Greg, and ask, within the vein of mental health and wellness, I'm always asking about self-care because I feel like that's a kind of a buzz phrase that people throw around a lot and they mean different things by it. What does self-care mean to Greg?
And self-care means certain things to Greg. And I also want you to know that self-care is an actual topic that we are very deliberate about when we do the support work, not only for people who are grieving, but also among the volunteers who are supporting people who are grieving. So self-care to me means being deliberate about it and not making it an afterthought. It's really realizing that life is hard. I'm doing hard things. I'm carrying a mental burden, especially for some of the co-volunteers who happen to be empaths they face an extra burden. So the kind of people, when I say empath, you have to be wired that way, to be so in touch with your fellow humans. I see a note saying my connection is on. Did I disappear for a sec?
We're good. No, we're
good?
good. Yeah.
Okay. but to really be deliberate and realize that it's hard. And I'm going to realize that it's hard, and I'm not going to be ashamed of that. And I'm going to budget time for me and to give myself pleasure and rest, whatever that is for me. And what I was saying before about the empaths, if you're an empath dealing with a world like this, you got to I urge you to really take it seriously, because you're carrying weight that other people are not. So to me, self-care, being deliberate about realizing that I deserve to recharge my batteries, and I'm going to figure out what that is for me, and I'm going to make sure it happens, and I'm going to do it unabashedly, without compunction and without shame. I'm going to make that happen for myself.
Love it. Yeah, and it's so interesting when I talk to some people that get the concept. They talk about self-care like it's a pillar, right, of your world. It has to be, like, in order to survive. Other people talk about it like it's optional, and the individuals that talk about it like it's optional oftentimes really become inundated with the stressors of life. So I like the way you put that. I think that's really, really important. And I think it's carried out differently for different people. Some people play pickleball, some people lift weights, some people meditate, some people, write poetry. There's lots of different ways, I think, to take good care of oneself. But the bottom line, the message you're sending, it's a great one, Greg, is you should take care of yourself. You should find a way or several ways to do that.
I don't want to get preachy here, but I will for the next 10 seconds if
okay.
I
Go
have
ahead.
your permission. I want to disabuse some people of a possible belief they have that running on all 8 cylinders or 9 cylinders is some kind of badge of honor, that not taking vacations, that, doing, if we're talking about young people, doing homework till midnight every night.
Yeah.
Good enough is good enough.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
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 So,
I think that's a great message to send. Matter of fact, I find those people often get sick, the people that run that way,
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, I'm sure that underpins a lot of mental health struggles, is people just don't give themselves any grace and don't realize they have the right to ease back and honor whatever it is about themselves that gives them joy, that they don't have to always be firing and achieving and yearning and striving. Like, for what? What is you might get that pot of gold, but who are you going to be? How healthy are you going to be at that point?
Right.
What are the values you're really living here? Make your own health, mental and physical, a key value, a key pillar of your life, and work backwards from that.
I like
off of my soapbox now.
No, I like how you said that. You can't say it enough. I think it's really important. I'm curious, to a young person listening, Greg, and they're hearing this, and maybe maybe they've never done that before. Maybe they've never prioritized it. Do you have any suggestions for a teen?
Yeah, well, when I got the expression "good enough is good enough," I didn't make that up myself. It was actually a therapist who was working with my older daughter.
Okay.
Because she was so she's 20 now, but a number of years ago, she was very much a perfectionist, and she didn't see 95 on a test as an achievement. She saw it as she blew 5%, and she's probably a bad person because of that. And she was really driving herself to be sick. And the message was, good enough is good enough. Do your work, try your best. There's no, we're not saying don't do that, but then ease off. Honor the fact that you're not a machine, that you're a human. You're allowed to make mistakes. You don't need to get 95. She happens to be academically inclined, but if you're my other daughter, quite a bit less so. In her case, we're celebrating a passing grade, and that's fine. And I told her, I don't care what your mark is. I just care that you worked hard, did your best, and that's okay, and live healthily.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Boy, young people lose sight of that so much. I joke that I have an occupation where I hang my degrees on my wall. And in 25 years, I've been asked about it 5 times, 3 of which people just wanted to talk about basketball. People don't care. And they're talking to me about intimate things in my office. Like, this is, you would think they would care. And I say that because kids put so much pressure on themselves. This is what kids say to me in my office. My grades will lead to my school, which will lead to my occupation, which will lead to my happiness. And I hear that sometimes from kids that are, 15, 16, 17 years old. I mean, to me, I talk about it a lot because I want kids to understand that most of us in our generation, if we were in school and we were pursuing something, our path would change 4 or 5 times throughout the journey. So it's almost impossible to sort of lay that out and stay with it all the way through.
I'd love to ask you, Mark, when kids or young adults talk like that, where is that coming from? Whose voice is
Great
that? I know
question.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there's some people it's within that
Yeah.
they've got this fire, but are they living somebody else's life
Great
or
question.
where's that
Yeah.
message coming from that is the trajectory to a happy, fulfilling life?
A great question. I think it comes from a few places. I think there's some kids it comes from internally. I think there's some kids it comes from their parents. And I think it's some kids get it offline and they see an individual in their 40s or 50s with endless bank accounts and big smiles on their faces. And they think, I have to be in a certain path to get into that occupational world. And what's sad is 9 times out of 10, the person they're seeing isn't real and the path is marketed, specifically to engage them. And kids are just too young to see that.
Yeah.
So it's a great question about where it comes from. I would
Yeah.
say to you, on the whole, kids chase happiness. That's what they want. They want to be
Mhm.
happy, but oftentimes they do that in the wrong way. So putting pressure on oneself at 15 or 16 or 17 years old, putting immense pressure on them to the point where I have to put them in a hospital or something like that is not the way to seek happiness. I like what you said earlier, actually. I think, recognizing when you're putting your best foot forward kind of doesn't matter what the grades are. If you're doing your best, that should be enough.
Yeah. I mean, results do matter, but at what expense, right? Like
Right.
at what
Right.
cost? I also want to ask you, you mentioned a word that stuck with me earlier when we were talking about self-care. You mentioned meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, this is Greg's opinion again, some form of meditation can be one of the most important things you could do for having a contented, happy life. It doesn't mean you need to sit with your eyes closed for hours or go to retreat. What I mean is becoming aware of your own thoughts and the influence they have on you. What do you think of that? Do you believe that meditation is something that should be encouraged with young
Absolutely.
people to have just to notice, what is the story I'm telling myself? And to
Yep.
step back and realize that's not me. That's just the story. Like these thoughts, I'm watching it kind of like a movie, you got to do more. You suck if you don't do this, or if you don't get that new purse, you suck. I've learned, and it's taken a lot of work and discipline to hear the story and to
Mhm.
see it for what it is. And then I can choose how to engage it, but it's separate from me now. I'm not just living the reality of my story. I can kind of say, oh, I'm going to examine my thoughts and what do I want to do about them? How practical do you think that is as a tool for young people?
I think it's very practical. I would say to you that meditation, in my eyes, and I'm sure there's people out there that are going to disagree with me, comes in various forms. For
Sure.
me,
Sure.
I like to get a bucket of balls, go to the golf course, and hit balls off the range. That's
Yeah.
meditative to me. It helps me
Meditative. Yeah.
think things through. A nice long bike ride helps me think things through. I think that when young people think of meditation, they think of sort of one avenue. I think of
Hmm.
lots of different behaviors that can be meditative. But I
Yes.
think the point is always exactly what you said, which is being more aware of your thoughts, where they're coming from, and do you in fact digest those?
Yes.
That's never a thought that kids have. It's
Yeah.
just always digested.
Yeah, should I swallow this thought or should I
Right.
just, spit it out or just
Spit
let
it
it
out.
float
Right.
by? But you also mentioned some other important things about the golf or the bike riding, which is also self-care. If you're
Hmm.
someone who knows that hitting a few balls or riding a bike is good for you, then do that. Carve out time
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
defend that time. Turn off, whatever you need to do. That is your time. You have every right to do that. And it pays dividends in your life. You'll be a better, happier, more fulfilled, content person, and you'll show up in the world better. You'll be better for everyone, right?
Greg, I think that's excellent advice. I'm really hoping people are listening because I think that I've met people, I personally do that. I've met people that do that. And it creates, we were talking happiness earlier, that creates happiness. It creates satisfaction. It creates, I'm a better dad. I'm a better therapist. I'm a better person when I take care of myself. And to me, I think if this world were filled with people that really took that seriously and really, I like how you said that, protected that time, boy, I think we'd have more smiles on faces than we do now. So it's an excellent piece of advice. Definitely something I think young people should really digest and think about and consider how they could do it. Because I think it's unique to everybody, but it's something really special and important. that when the world gets on us, and just sort of sits on us and we're overwhelmed, we have to have a go-to or two.
Now, this is something that ties into the grief work, but I think it's also a universal principle. And maybe it's not so much one that affects younger people, but definitely their parents. And I'm wondering how you would handle this when somebody tells you, I don't have that luxury. I have responsibilities to take care of people. And what you're saying is great. I see the value, but I don't have the time. I have kids. I've got the job, and I cannot afford the luxury of focusing on me.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say bluntly, make the time.
Make the time.
I would say the time doesn't have to be an hour or two. It could be 15 minutes. It could be 10
Yeah.
minutes. But
Yeah.
there's times where I'm in my office and I'm stressed because I've seen a lot of patients, and I go outside and I take a walk for 5 minutes. And just that fresh air clears my head. Just the moving my muscles a little bit clears my head. I think it is necessary for human beings. And I think when people say that, because I've heard that many, many times, Craig, I don't
Yeah.
have the time, it's an
Yeah.
excuse. That's all
Yeah.
it is. It's an
Yeah.
excuse. And if we really needed to, like if God forbid our doctor said, hey, Mark, you know what? You just had a heart attack. You have to do this now. We would
Yeah.
somehow find the time.
Yeah. And I
You
think
know?
people might be waiting for the heart attack. That's the challenge, right?
Yeah, so maybe that's the a good place for us to end the conversation. Don't wait on the heart attack, right? Make sure that you're taking good care of yourselves, please. Hear Greg's words. I think they landed with me. I'm hoping they land with parents and kids out there as well. I think we all need to take care of each other, but we also need to take a look at how we're doing with ourselves. Greg, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're super busy, and please hear me say a huge thank you from Connecticut.
Ah,
The work that you're doing is so valuable, and I can only imagine those families needing that opportunity to be heard and to just be present with, and you're providing that. So just know that what you're doing is massive, and I think for those families in need, just immense for them. So thank you so much for what you do.
pleasure and an honor. So nice to talk to you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful night, Greg. You take care.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's all for this episode of Normalize It Forward. May this conversation serve as a reminder that you are never alone in facing your mental health struggles. There are always people who can help. To dive even deeper into our journey of normalizing one of the biggest issues young people face, check out more episodes of the show at youareheard.com. It's UAREHEARD.com. Continue gaining access to the right tools, the best resources, and the most insightful advice to achieve positivity, mindfulness, and genuine happiness.